All right, guys. Well, I had to pick this one because this is what we do. We counter the narratives, and one of my favorite narratives is legacy media's PR spin of inflation. And as you can see, if you're watching the YouTube and if you're listening, I have a tweet here by Joe Weisenthal. He's a Bloomberg analyst. He's been cozying up to Bitcoiners. He's friends with Bitcoiners, and yet he puts out this garbage on Bloomberg. Anyways, here's the tweet, and he goes, "The absurd attempt by Bitcoiners to change the definition of inflation. I wrote a follow-up on how ridiculous it is to define inflation as something other than price go up as a way to salvage Bitcoin's inflation hedge narrative." So let's get into this article a little bit. I apologize, guys. I will read a little more than usual because I want to, we're going to counter some of the stuff that he's saying in this. So let's just get right into it.
Oh, wait, this is real? There's a Bloomberg article that says Bitcoiners are trying to redefine the world. Guys, this is what victory looks like. This is what winning looks like. The fact that they had to come up. This is like, do you remember we covered this for such a long time, the Financial Times article, and it literally said stop making fun of fiat. Stop calling fiat a meme, because it isn't. This is at that level of victory. It's that freaking big. Anyways.
Yes, let's get into this. So I do have an extra fail, but we might just cover this one. But so here, let's get into this. This is Joe Weisenthal on Bloomberg, and it's titled, "Bitcoiners are trying to redefine the word inflation." So again, guys, I will read some of this stuff, and then we'll talk about it. So these days, there's a lot of arguing about the definition of the word recession, whether we're in one, and to be honest, you can understand both sides. So consumer sentiment is pretty terrible right now, and given that 2/4 of negative GDP is a common dictionary definition of a recession, it seems reasonable to say that we're in one right now following the negative data released last week. But as we've been telling you guys for weeks now, on the other hand, the National Bureau of Economic Research has for a long time been the official arbiter of a recession in the U.S. and also economic activity such as consumption, employment, and investment has been growing all year. So there's also good reason to not characterize the current environment as a recession. So just about everyone can agree that inflation is very high right now, with several measures at levels that haven't been seen in around 4 decades. And this shouldn't be controversial. But actually, there is some controversy. There's a cohort of Bitcoiners now arguing that we're not actually experiencing inflation right now. I haven't heard that, but okay. Anyway, seems weird, right? Bitcoiners are always going on about inflation, and now it's finally here. Except the problem is that Bitcoin has performed very poorly over the last 7 or 8 months. Again, zoom out. And for years,
Bitcoin...
Wait,
hold on. Because you got to connect. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Javi. You got to connect the dots, right? Remember that article that we just covered from Bloomberg, right? The only thing they focused on was on Bitcoin's price, the fact that it goes down. Right. It's again, You have 2 separate articles, both from Bloomberg, part of the whole, the old. You have to understand the mind of your enemies. This is what they read. They read the Financial Times. They read Bloomberg. Right. So it's a narrative. Right. It's like, look, it sucks. Inflation isn't real. What's real is Bitcoin's price went down. Right. So again, I don't know how long they'll be able to put up with this, because as we know, number go up technology goes up into the right. And inflation goes down into the right forever. Anyways, Opti, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Dude, let's give him the signal. I am okay with this. And for years, Bitcoin was promoted as an inflation hedge. And so it's kind of a narrative wrecker that the price is doing so badly these days. So rather than going back to the drawing board and come up with a new reason to own Bitcoin, the answer some have settled on is to redefine inflation to something else. And then he links to some articles that say inflation is not actually about price going up, but rather inflation is about increases in money aggregates like the M2 money supply. And then he continues to go on and has another link showing that Bitcoin's market cap has risen and fallen with some measure of the global money supply. And again, he adds some stuff, and he goes, let's just say for a moment that the chart is basically true and that historically Bitcoin has in fact moved in tandem with some measure of money supply. That's still not a good defense of this redefining of inflation. It goes back to the question of why people would want to own an inflation hedge anyway. The reason people might want to own an inflation hedge is because it's bad when prices of things you buy go up. It will hurt your standard of living. And so the idea is that you want to own some kind of asset that will rise during such periods to offset these increases. That's the point of a hedge, to protect against something that's bad. Talking about hedging against money supply makes no sense because an increase in the money supply isn't necessarily bad. Okay, Joe. Contrary to what some Bitcoiners seem to believe, there's no reason to think that something bad happens to you when M2 or M3 goes up. Remember what Nico said earlier, inflation is a hidden tax because it's stealing your wealth slowly. Okay, Joe. Anyways, sometimes an increase in a monetary measure can presage an increase in consumer prices, in which case something bad might happen as a result of the increase in the money supply. But this is far from a consistent thing. He goes on, going back to periods of more normal inflation, we saw a big year-on-year jump in M2 in 2011 in the wake of the great financial crisis, but inflation remained fairly mild and the increase didn't last very long. Remember how we tell you guys how CPI is easily manipulatable? Just going to drop that in there. There was also a big gap in 2009 when M2 soared while inflation went down, and also the timing of the relationship is suspect and inconsistent. The point is, if you look at the above chart and think there's any meaningful relationship between these measures of money supply and the actual prices of goods, you're squinting too hard. And again, the only reason to hedge is against something bad happening. Perhaps you could argue that if these M measures just keep going up too much, then the entire fiat system will collapse and leave Bitcoin as the sole survivor. But this is really just an extreme version of price inflation. And beyond that, if that's the bet, then it undermines the idea that Bitcoin did its job in 2021. Zoom out. Anyways, now some might argue Bitcoin isn't a particularly good consumer price hedge, but is a hedge against asset inflation. Inflationistas used to talk a lot about asset inflation in the old days because stocks and bonds and real estate were the only things really going up. But here's the thing, you don't need a hedge against asset inflation because you can just buy, well, the assets. If there's some set of conditions causing stocks, bonds, and real estate to go up, you can just buy stocks, bonds, and real estate. The fact of the matter is that there's a commonly understood definition of the word inflation, and many people bought Bitcoin after being told that it was a hedge against inflation due to its fixed supplies. And over the last year, while prices of all kinds and goods have shot up, owning Bitcoin has made you poorer rather than richer. That's probably not what people sign up for when they bought in. And he's got this meme here and he goes, what do your foster parents do? This is Terminator. They laser eyes Bitcoin shills. So he calls the parents, what is the definition of inflation? And the shill goes, hi honey, it's when prices go up. And Terminator goes, your foster parents are dead. So, Joe.
Dude, they're using our warfare. They're using our methods of warfare. You have Bloomberg literally putting memes in their articles to try to keep up with our memetic warfare, and they're fucking losing. This is what victory feels like. Savor it. Experience it. Feel it. This is winning. We're winning. Anyway.
Let's go. Okay, so to just clarify with Joe here, what is the definition of inflation that most Bitcoiners talk about when we talk about inflation? And of course, I'm going to go to Mises.org. And as you can see, this article is from 3/06/2002. So we're not redefining terms. We are using the terms as they are correctly supposed to be used. So is inflation about price rises? And we go, the fundamental problem here is a failure to define the problem properly. For example, the definition of human action is not that people are engaged in all sorts of activities, but that they are engaged in purposeful activities. Purpose gives rise to an action. Similarly, the essence of inflation is not a general rise in prices, but an increase in the supply of money, which in turn sets in motion a general increase in the prices of goods and services. Consider the case of a fixed money supply. Whenever people increase their demand for some goods and services, money will be allocated towards other goods. Thus, the prices of some goods will increase, i.e. more money will be spent on them, while the prices of other goods will fall, i.e. less money will be spent on them. If the demand for money increases against goods and services, there will be a general fall in prices. In order for an economy to experience a general rise in prices, there must be an increase in the money stock. With more money and no change in money demand, people can now allocate a greater amount of money for all goods and services. Inflation is a general increase in the money supply. So, of course, I'm going to find some Bitcoiners that I like to dunk on this article, and who better than Alan Farrington? And he goes, in all caps, so you know it's serious. The absurd attempt by Bitcoiners to insist on the original meanings of words and reject the propagandist redefinitions, which is entirely obvious, by the way, by thinking for 5 seconds about why that word was chosen as a metaphor for the phenomenon it describes. And furthermore, guys, we covered Paul Krugman yesterday, and he himself is doing some redefinition of stuff. So I wanted to add this in here because it's a message that Nico is saying right now during this article. This is us winning, and this is them trying to redefine what terms mean so that they can spin this in a PR moment so that, you know, the noobs out there can find the party line and bite it hook, line, and sinker. So remember what I said yesterday about Paul Krugman when we played that video? And Krugman goes, since I get lots of mockery for having talked about a Biden boom, I thought I'd share a chart. And it's cumulative jobs added, and it looks like, you know, Biden has more jobs than Trump. And he goes, the problem may be that the Biden economy boomed too much, feeding inflation, and that it now needs to cool off, which may involve a recession, but hasn't yet. And I really like this comment. And he's paraphrasing. TLDR, you're going broke because you're too rich, you see. Guys, we said this all week, and we will continue to say it. They need to redefine what these terms mean because the cat is out of the bag. We are winning this meme war, and our narrative is being pushed far and wide. You can't stop the signal, and this is them trying to stop the signal any way possible. So what are they going to go do? They're going to roll out their PR media. They're going to use our techniques, like Nico's saying. They're going to try to use memes to tell you fake news, but we know what is really going on. Bitcoin is truth, and you cannot fight truth. Hence why our memes are winning and why we are winning this war, because it is an information war, or as I've been saying, it's a disinformation war. You are battling the disinformation with truth, and truth will always win in the end. Anyways, I know I went a little long. We're cutting our time short. So Nico, Javier, what's up? What are your guys' thoughts on this? I know you already went in, Nico.
I'm glad that you went a little long, bro, because you really highlighted today something really important, right? Is that mematic warfare is working. You have the Financial Times and now Bloomberg, and Bloomberg's the craziest. They're stooping down and using our means to try to convey a message, and they will fall out. They will fall right on their face, and that's exactly what they're doing. That article will age like milk. Yes, fine, you're right. In the short term, Bitcoin's extremely volatile. It needs to be volatile for the number to go up the way that it does. Over a period of 3, 4, 5 years, let's touch back and let's see how effective Bitcoin is at not only hedging yourself from inflation, escaping from inflation. Anyways, Javi, what are your thoughts, brother?
One of the things that these new things happening in the narrative in America is that I already saw this happening here in Venezuela. Like at the start of the hyperinflation, they just hit the inflation numbers and stopped to share any kind of numbers around what the real inflation was. And then they started to try to meme why it was good to create more money to give to the poor people that were suffering because of what was happening to the economy. And then it became in a big spiral of shit because anybody really believe. I think that there are people that still supporting the chavismo, but the normal and middly smart people are really not. So when you start to realize that these concepts are really void, they don't have any mean in any way. They can say that there is no inflation because they have the means to put out this meme around that there is no inflation, there is no recession, there is anything like that. This already happened here in Venezuela. So the thing that I said at the start is these things were happening here in Venezuela because we were a really weak economy and we have the struggle of the chavismo that is a cancer. But it is not just because of those political elements. It is because of the a systemic failure that is in how fiat system works. So that's what we are seeing, the same patterns now in America, the country that where was the model to all the countries. So it is really the same thing happening again. Like I'm seeing the same thing that I already lived through, but now it's your turn, guys. So I hope the shit don't hit the fan so hard. But Bitcoin is the thing that I think that many people will realize that is the only tool to get rid of the bullshit that these guys are going to talk a lot.